Take yourself to home, Mr. Mankiewicz, or shall I call you Herman?
Please, call me Mank.
Mank.
Mank. Mank.
Mank.
This is Herman Mankiewicz, but we're to call him Mank.
That's why I always want Mank around.
Hey guys, welcome to Shot Talk. I'm so excited for today's edition. We've got Mank filmmakers, DP Erik Messerschmidt and director David Fincher. So we are super excited. The movie was nominated 10 Oscar nominations, right? One more than the original Citizen Kane. So you got that. There you go. You got him. You win. And and we're gonna just talk about Mank, and we're gonna go talk about the story behind the shots, and also just talk about wherever the conversation comes our way. Mank is now on ShotDeck because I love just being able to look at these images and have other people sort of understand the craftsmanship that you guys were able to pull off in this film. So congrats for the movie. How do you get started when you start a film? Like, do you start with reference material? Do you use material? Do you, as a filmmaker, David, when you say, okay, I'm gonna now make Mank as my next film, your father wrote the script, right? So you must have like had this sitting in your pocket for some time.
Yeah, 30 years.
Yeah, what's the process a little bit?
Well, I mean, the process of trying to make any movie in black and white and mono is, what are they? It's the buyer's market. It's not a seller's market. It's originally the notion was to do something in 4:3, shoot it with BNCRs and
Oh, really? That deep?
Well, this was 1992 or 93 when I read the first draft, and we talked at that time about trying to get the movie made. And so at the time we were looking into, can we buy 250,000 feet of Orvo, black and white negative, and can we now hopefully get the ASA up to 200, 320, somewhere in there, where we could shoot T16, T11 and not, need 600 million amps of DC power
Right.
to run brood arcs, 3 feet off camera on either side of the frame. At the point in time that Netflix said we might be interested, that's when the conversation began about, how would we really execute this? And I think, from both of our standpoints, the idea of a Mitchell BNCR with double X trying to get a T16 on a soundstage was not happening. So we talked about digital, and we talked about, and I had, I have a fantastic and friendship with Jared Land at Red. And so when the Leica monochrome came out, and I don't remember when that was 2008 or something like that, I had sent him this saying, can you do this with your sensors? Can can we pull the RGB off it and just assign luminance values? And he was like, yeah, it's easy, but unfortunately it's going to be super high ASA. It's like,
that's a good thing. Yeah, exactly. You're like, even better, right? Like,
yeah, so 3,200 ASA, like Greg Toland is like cursing us, from beyond the grave. Like, God, these Nimnos, look at all the, and at the time, at the time that we started talking about, the digital black and white acquisition, Red just went out, they made a camera. I shot a Calvin Klein commercial with it, and then I shot a music video for Justin Timberlake with it, and it worked great. It was, it was flawless to work with. It was amazing to have something. I mean, on the suit and tie video, we were in this location. I think we had footlights at the stage, and we had super troopers that we had I think it was 6 or 7 full stop scrims, like, I mean, it was like a masonite filter in front of the Super Trooper to get it down to a place where we could shoot at 3000 ASA. And we were shooting that video at like 568. And it was pretty astounding what we could do. And so but this is all by way of saying, when the time came to make Mank, it was like kind of a no-brainer. We're gonna do it with Red, and then the question became the aspect ratio.
Right.
And I had to just fall on the grenade about that, because I've never been able to frame for 1:3:3. I so don't like it.
I hear you.
It's fine for a Pepsi can logo, it's perfect for that. But it's just terrible for screen direction. I mean, not terrible, but it's work. And so
It's hard to frame a dining table.
Yeah, right. How 3 people.
and yeah, 54-foot dining
That's
table.
right.
But that was another thing, because a lot of the decisions were made about aspect ratio. In my mind, I was thinking, well, Hearst is going to be at one end of this. We were going to do the breakfast scene from Kane, and Hearst was going to be at one end of a 54-foot table, and Mankiewicz was going to be at the other. And then, of course, the research comes back, and it's like, well, Hearst never sat at the head of the table. He always sat at the middle. And it was like, oh, God, even in death, this guy is.
Yeah, but I think that speaks to like the question of like research and reference material. And is that, do you like, did you start and go, God, when's the last time I watched Kane? I'm gonna watch Kane again just to see if it fed the machine in your brain to sort of go, okay, there.
Listen, we wanted it to be, we wanted to be able to, use it as, true north. We were definitely using it as a sort of, a fixture in the skies against which to navigate. And I think Eric and I, we talked about this. I said, look, they're best laid plans. It's not going to come off the way we want to. We're not making the movie for $100 million. We're making the movie for a price, and we can kill ourselves to try to impose, try to milk as much of this Kane idea, or we can just say it's more Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. It's one of the characters that came out he was off stage the entire time, waiting in the wings, and this is his story. So I think it was, and it was also, when we had this conversation, a lot of Kane takes place in a mausoleum, just the sets themselves. I mean, the underlying kind of message that you're receiving as you watch that is, not only is the Thatcher Memorial Library a tomb, but Xanadu is kind of a tomb. Certainly Bernstein's, office is a tomb. There's a lot of, you can do that kind of ascribing space or describing space through shafts of light when you're talking about a tomb. And we were talking about the back lot at Paramount and MGM, and the back lot at Paramount and MGM are, baked in sunlight and, white stucco, and the light bounces around, and there's dust and sand on the streets. It's Hollywood in its heyday, when everyone was coming west to be part of this westward expansion. And that's that's the story we were telling. So initially we started talking about Kane, and then I just said, we're going to make ourselves crazy trying to apply an aesthetic that has nothing to do with our sets and nothing to do with our world.
And then Eric, you're now jumping in, and of course with those same directives, but also your own perspective. When David asked you to shoot the movie, you obviously have your own process that maybe is also separate and parallel, with David at the same time, in terms of how you're thinking about this black and white movie that is, again, like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, like Kane is present somewhere in there, even if you
Sure.
want it to be.
I think, it's like there was a naive excitement around, oh, we get to do all the black and white stuff. we get to do all this a high contrast stuff. And even if you look at Kane, the expositional scenes aren't lit that way. It's like
Right.
the Thatcher Library reveal is lit that way. The
But like a
some of
shot
the
like
stuff
this
in her,
is not.
but the
Yeah.
stuff in the newsroom, the stuff like this is not, right. And I think, there was certainly for myself, and later for both of us, as we sort of started to break the movie down, there was like, oh, we get to do all of this thing, but in the end, you still have to tell the story, and you have expositional scenes, you have conversational scenes between characters that require lots of coverage, and you just can't light it that way. It's not only would it be inappropriate uh, thematically, but it doesn't really work logistically either. So there was a balance of trying to find out. I think look at the scenes where it's appropriate to be stylistic and and uh, and pay some homage, um, and then really just focus on telling the story that's being staged in front of you, and find the best choices you can make within the sets. And it's like what David's saying. It's like, yeah, we had Mank in a bed in a bungalow in the desert that should be lit from the windows, and that's just the reality. It's like I don't know that there was another way I would ever want to do it. That sort of just felt totally right to light it in that way. So, um,
Well, let's.
it's a funny
Yeah.
thing of like trying to find that balance. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's precise. I mean, I really appreciate that you guys shot it in 2.2 because I can't imagine
Point
somebody
2-1.
2.1. But like it used to be like you'd shoot spherical 2.35, anamorphic 2.39, 1.85, all this sort of standard things. This 2.1, 2.2 thing, which I guess the original 70 millimeter, right? Like those kind of things. But why not 239? Why not or why not 235? Why not like how did you land? So was it a nice compromise between, because that's become a little bit more commonplace, certainly to see that aspect ratio, and you didn't see it as much over the last 20 years.
Well, we did it for Mindhunter. I think we started with it on House of Cards, and the reason was, I mean, it was just purely practical. It was we put up, every aspect ratio that was, in my dog-eared ASC manual, and put it on just as a white screen on a display, and it just felt to me like, 239, 235, 240 is just a little too squashed top and bottom for a display. I'm doing this film appreciation show, and one of the things, and seeing 133, center cropped and put into a 178 display, like you can't. It doesn't look. It looks square. I mean, it really looks like 2.25 now because we're so used to things being so wide. I mean, your phone is, most of the images on your phone don't really, they're tighter than 16 by 9. But anyway, I just could not, I couldn't reconcile the idea of 133. We started talking about 178. By the time we were having the conversation about 178, I started to, let's just put them up on a display and see which one gives us the best of kind of both worlds. It's got enough height for a display that it doesn't feel like you like you actually are looking through a letterbox, and it's still wide enough that if for whatever reason it gets to a big screen, it'll sit comfortably in your peripheral vision. So it was a, we just auditioned them, and on that show we decided, well, 2:1 looks pretty good. I don't think we used any HMIs in this. I'm just looking at your.
Well, yeah, let's like one of the things that we like to do with this conversation that's like maybe slightly different than all the other sort of awards talk and all the rest of it is to just kind of do a bit of a deep dive and a little bit of the story behind the shots. This is on stage, correct? This is a room that you guys spend a decent amount of time in the movie in, where Mank is writing and he's mending his leg.
I would say we spend an indecent amount of time, but that was me.
Okay, wait. Where in the like? Let me ask you, just there's obviously scheduling and all these other things that come into play. But when you think about like this part of the shooting, are you doing it all together? Or are you sort of splitting it up so you don't get kind of bored as hell with this room? Are you building
No,
this on stage?
we moved onto the stage and we plowed through it in chronology.
Yeah. And here's something I'm sharing your key grip on the movie I'm working on right now, Jerry Dietz.
Yeah.
And I said, "Hey Jerry, what's outside those windows?" And he goes, "I go, you got trans lights? You got?" And he goes, "No, just
White.
just white." And I go, "That's." By the way, I literally was talking to somebody yesterday, and I said, "I think that's actually should be the future of like, which is if you need something, put it in, but if you don't, what do you? We end up not seeing that much out there anyway."
Being there might be one of the most beautifully photographed American movies of all time, and they didn't even bother to. I mean, it's so fantastic how quickly you fall into this. Like, yeah, it's just so bright outside. I mean, it's DC. It's right there. It's like,
Yeah, these shots from being there. You're right. And this movie is glorious. You're right about that.
unbelievable.
Look at The Godfather.
And
The
you're right.
Godfather,
Like,
all the windows are blown out.
Yeah. Well, but and some of the stuff, like actually in Tahoe, you're seeing what's out there. It's just, 5 stops, 6 stops over.
yeah, and actually in a very practical sense, you come with the baggage, whether you know it or not, of being the conversation of a lot of other people's directors and DPs on other sets, right? There's a lot of talk about like, what does Fincher do? There's like legends. He doesn't use track. He just stabilizes everything. There's like all kinds of stuff you probably know. Some of it you don't know all of it, but there's a lot of chatter on other people's sets about what you do because
Everything's handheld. We just stabilize
that's
everything.
exactly right. Yeah, like that's right. It's always on the shoulder. It just looks rock steady. But this idea that you don't use track and you stabilize things, that somehow is in the ether. I've read it in like Slack conversations. Is that not like where you are like, well, no, actually, why? There's times in which I can roll on the floor and just stabilize, or maybe it was more Mindhunter stuff. I don't know, but
We did. We've done that.
Yeah.
I prefer to be on track, but when if you're, we did it. We did it on. I started doing it not willy-nilly, but here and there on House of Cards. In the opening, there's an opening sequence where Kevin Spacey does this walk through this whole crowd of people and introduces you to this person, and introduces you to that person. And to make the most out of the room, we need to see that wall and then a section of that wall and then a section of that wall, and then we need to go back. And we could have. We did on Zodiac, made a whole elaborate track out of PVC that was, it took 3 days to rig. And
Mike Koo told me all about it. I know.
Yeah, no, and it worked beautifully. It worked great. I mean, the only times you get in is when you get into this weird back pan shift, and they built all kinds of like, dampening stuff for like a Mitchell head. It was unbelievable. It was a great thing. But for this House of Cards thing, and for some of the stuff that we did on Mindhunter, there was just no reason to. I mean, you can use a dance floor, and then if you're in a penitentiary and the concrete floors are poured properly, and for the most part they are, there's definitely times when you can just go, we're going right on the floor, and you can roll over a wood screw, and you can, with soft tires, and take all of that stuff out. So, I mean, I look at it as, also Eric, we got pretty comfy with the
Ronin.
The Ronin, yeah.
The Ronin.
The Ronin
Yeah.
it's amazing. I mean, in order to be able to have it, you have to have a camera that's 8 or 9 pounds,
Right.
in order to really make it work. You can't, you don't want to take a Ronin 2 and put a Panaflex on it. But when you're talking about a DSMC2 or, the little cameras that we have now, it makes all the sense in the world. If you're just taking this kind of stuff out, it'll disappear. You'll never see it.
Yeah. No, it's great. And it's like using technology in a way that audiences will never suspect. But Eric, on a global sense, like when you think about the movie you set out to make in your mind, and then as it progresses across the shooting, is there some sense of where you discover kind of the movie you're lighting and the movie you're making all together, that's slightly, you know, progresses and evolves as you make it, and in ways that you didn't sort of imagine, like, you know, because again, there's a lot of planning, but until you actually start photographing the people and lighting them, and you know, what was like the first big set you had to light and jump
Well,
into? Do you
the first
recall?
scene, yeah, the first scene we shot was the writers' room at Paramount, and we reshot it. You know, we totally blew it. I mean, it was like the first scene, and it was, you know, it's funny. Like we had this idea in the prep. It was like, okay, then Paramount will be dull and soft lit and boring, and MGM will be glamorous and hard lit, and that was this conceptual idea. You know, it was like, okay, well, MGM is the star, and Paramount is you know. And so we did that initially in the first, you know, that first scene, and we lit it, kind of blew out the windows, and it was kind of soft side light, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work at all.
Did
And
you feel like it wasn't working as well, or did David jump in, or was it just a mutual thing?
Yeah, no, we got about halfway through the first day, and I think from a design standpoint, the Don Bert and I had tried to delineate Paramount as a much more of a sweatshop, and then MGM as this streamlined, you know, Art Deco. It was a voluptuous curves and acres of wood paneling, and these, you know, places where you could get, you know, Art Deco lamps and soft light, and the way that's, and then this set, which looks much more like, it looks more like the newspaper from Kane, but it also looks more like, you know, it looks more like an industrial space that one might find in a behind a storefront in Brooklyn. You know what I mean? It's so what ended up happening was there were, and we wanted to have the shades, and we wanted to have, because we wanted to tell the story of, they go, I mean, their offices, their conference room for these story conference is right next to a factory filled with typewriters and women just pounding away because that was the copy department, right? They would just retype a script. And so that's going on, and there's this hubbub of activity, and then you go through this, you know, transom, you know, almost like, you know,
the gate.
yeah, the glass door with the shades on it, the private detective shades, you know.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
get inside, and what you realize is that they're all drinking, and they're all gambling, and they're all smoking, and they're all doing everything other than what they're supposed to be doing. And you know, they've gone down to you know, whatever, Jumbo's Clown, and they've found a burlesque dancer, and they've said, hey, would you like to come? And she's now working in the story department. And what you get is, behind this door is just this kind of, you know, animal house of douchebaggery. And what we initially were trying to do light-wise with this just wasn't eating into the room enough, because there were so many barricades to the light being able to permeate. So initially, when we were doing this, we didn't bring in hard light through that door and cut like a channel through the middle of it that I could sort of stage people in and out of that light. It was a much softer kind of experience, and we just couldn't
In color, it would have looked great.
Yeah, it
That's
actually,
interesting, right?
it looked really pretty. It just, in black and white, it just didn't make an impression. It just didn't have that.
Didn't work.
You needed a broad brushstroke in there that you could kind of key everything off of. And so we said, throw that away.
But Eric, did that idea that like it just didn't resonate on black and white, and that you needed to paint with a bit of a broader brush, was that then sort of informative for future days of shooting?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, it hurts your ego, but you get over it quickly. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter. It was like,
Was it like, were you like stressed out that day? Did you have a bad sleep that night?
no, what, the night after, the night
The
before?
night after.
Uh,
The night after, like you're like, wait
no,
a second, I just
Sleep. When you're in production, who sleeps?
well, yeah, I mean, like, what level of sleep? Is it something you're dreaming of the next day, or are you like fretting about the day you just had? Right, exactly.
I just perpetually, I just hear David saying "cut, go again" in my sleep. You know, that's all I hear. It's no, it was one of those things. It was like we tried it. We sat down at lunch. It was like, this doesn't really work. Okay, um, we'll fix it. It was, and you know, funny enough, the next scene we did is the scene in where they're playing poker in the conference room, which is very hard lit. It's got all those, you know, slashes of light, which was the plan, you know. And it was like, I think for the film, for both of us in the process of making the movie, it was very much like trying to figure out where the line of delineation was. You know, like, where do we set the bar? Where do we lean into the homage? Because it's like black and white, I think, unfortunately, is interpreted in such a way where it's like it has to be stylistic. You can't just shoot the film in black and white. You have to, you know, there are these weird expectations put onto the medium where it's like, oh, it has to look like this, and it's like, well, it doesn't always have to look like this, you know. For this scene, it felt right, you know.
I would say that it's not so much that there's baggage or expectation that comes with, you know, nobody expects, you know, a film to look like Greg Toland shot it. Nobody, but there is, black and white forces the viewer to assess the image in terms of composition, shapes, foreground, background, how you're separating, because you don't have the thing that we use every day, you know, in our eye sockets to do. Color allows us to make these separations, and color cinematography has become, you know, the purview of shallow focus, like that. I mean, you know, if you basically go, you know, from The Conformist through, you know, all of Ridley and Adrian and Tony and Alan, you know, you look at that entire like movement in the 70s of, in Storaro, I mean, the Italians too. There's this kind of acceptance that this is, I mean, Connie Hall was doing it, this acceptance of this is how we're going to do this with color cinematography. Once that's off the table and you're dealing with something where the, you know, the person in the foreground and the extra 135 feet away are now in sharp focus, and you can see that guy's disinterest, or you can see the fact that he's going, God, take 26, I'm just so bored, you know. It becomes a completely different conversation, and that conversation has, I feel, less to do with stylization and what's expected of black and white. It's simply that black and white is going to occupy a different part of the input that we have as human beings. We look at images differently when they're photographed in black and white than when they're in color. And so to be true to the story that we were telling and still, you know, trap it in the aspect of the time, which was this early, you know, recording medium, we had to be flexible in terms of how we were thinking about it. Because you could do, you know, there's a lot of stuff in Manhattan that we looked at and talked about, and we were like, that's too modern. Like, that just feels that, you know, it doesn't have, it's a much softer, light version of black and white.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
And we did do some of it, you know, but I mean, we never did anything like that.
No, you're right.
There's some stuff in the bungalow that is a little bit like this, but not nearly this soft.
And it's not nearly this. This is there's a mundanity to this.
Yeah.
That he pulls off, that Gordy pulls off exquisitely. You know what I mean? That's the thing that's always, when you really are looking at somebody who's masterful, it's how they make how they make something that's supposed to be mundane still be part of this tapestry that can have gestures like the opening sequence in Manhattan.
Yeah, for 100%. This conversation, one of the things that I know I've talked 1,000 times about, which is you have the, I guess, the benefit, or sort of like of gaining some shooting days, but on movies that are shot on a price. Like, you're not making these extraordinary, like, huge movies all the time, but you're also getting shooting days. So there's this idea that, like, how does Fincher allow you to have time? How do you have time? And I guess maybe some of these decisions about how you spend the money. And I guess one of the things that comes with you and the world is a very practical filmmaker that knows very much what they want. So you're not spending money where it's not needed, I guess. And maybe that buys you more time and all the rest of it.
We do everything to squeeze this lemon. Just for my money, the only reason that we're there is to photograph actors, right? And so the notion of, how was their sleep last night at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and quick, let's get them out of here as fast as possible, makes no sense to me. So I trade everything. I look at it and I trade the amount of, first of all, I don't like to fight my way through 90 people to get to somebody to be able to whisper in their ear, maybe try to take the, for my money, I want the fewest amount of people between me and the work that I'm trying to get done with the actors, which is, I understand it's just a narrow portion of the work that has to be done. There's all kinds of, like, huge physical, the physical plant aspect of filmmaking. But on the day, the idea is to whittle it back so that you aren't, you don't have, the more people you have, the more drivers you have, the more toilets you have, the more cable you have, the more. And my attitude is, I will trade Technicrane shots. I don't allow Steadicam within 6 miles of me because I just hate the aesthetic of it. I completely love that it exists, and when it's the perfect tool, it is the perfect tool. But for the most part, it's used as a way. It's this kind of floating thing that I just don't. It's for the point of view of a drunk, it's perfect. Like, that's the tool. But for everything else, like, it's great for following fucking big wheels. Like, it's killer for that. But I don't like it for. I would like the world to be registered. I like that the actors. I like the cut of the fedora and the silhouette of the shoulders to be notched into the outside of the Biltmore Hotel. I want to make sure that is a repeatable phenomenon and doesn't end up being this thing that's kind of like this. Actually, that might have been a scene that would have been perfect.
Well, I bring that up because I go, okay, so then the complexity then becomes, you don't do it at the expense of long walk and talks. You do them a lot in this movie. In fact, you actually travel great distances with people in this movie. And then when you think, okay, so let's jump in for just a technical thing. How are you executing this shot when it's traveling great distances? Is there, I assume you can't have track because they'd be walking through it, but maybe you did, and you're because obviously you want that stability, but is it on the floor?
This one, yeah. Well, this one's in two parts. The hallway was no.
Yes, that's right, and then outside.
It's on a Ronin. It's a Ronin stabilized gimbal in front of them.
This which part?
And then
the exterior in that one. Yeah.
That one, yeah, that's an interior, and then we match the height, and the exterior is done on track with a long offset. I mean, Jerry built it was like a 12-foot steel offset off the track.
That's just
so
off,
we're just high enough so
yeah.
we don't see the track when we're at the end of the
Tracks off camera
Yeah.
left.
So
Yeah, exactly, right over here.
tracks off
where-
camera left. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. Yeah. In the early takes, all those extras all tripped over it. So this, yeah.
Well, sure. I would imagine that's pretty complicated.
Yeah. So every time the actors would complain, like, take 45, it's like, hey man, that guy in the background, it's his fault.
He totally ate
Yeah,
shit
well,
in
it's-
the
it-
background.
they're-
Yeah. So it's
This, I mean, there's so many sequences, but there's a rhythm to this sequence that's fucking amazing. To go from this like powerful walk and talk in which he has such strength in this, he's making, first of all, it's one of the greatest lines. I've repeated it recently to somebody. And is that a line that your father came out from like nowhere? Which is, it's the only business in which all they have is their memory, and we
No, he
still
said that.
and we still own own that. That's an incredible like assessment of what the film product is.
No, he said that. Louis B. Mayer said that. Just as Louis B. Mayer said, in order for the family to stay together, everybody has to take a cut and pay. Like he said this shit. Like these are quotes.
Yeah, this speech where he basically brings all his talent together and the grips and the wings, who are like, wait a second, we're not, what are we doing here? And like all the talent are like, well, we're with you, Louis B. It's a straight, but so you've got this long walk and talk. Obviously, these are shot separately, but Eric, tell me a little bit about this scene in terms of, because I love that. I really love this sort of, I guess, simplicity of just these lights that are turned on. It has this incredibly graphic sense. All of these frames in this scene, I just adore this. The whole rhythm of this entire section of the movie.
you know, it's
Tell me a little
funny
about
thing
what
about that.
here.
Well, that scene was one that we had spent a lot of time prepping and discussing the Trocadero stuff. We had spent a lot of time prepping and discussing the walk and talk night exteriors. And a lot of our energy in the prep was directed towards that. And then there was always the scene in the background. It was like, yeah, Louis is going to be in the soundstage and Don's going to build some bleachers and that's going to be what it is. And we never scouted it. We was just like, yeah, it's a stage, you know. And before we were supposed to go shoot that, Don came to the set and he was like, all right, what the fuck are you guys like? What do you want to do here? And we said, well, it's okay. Maybe they put some green beds in and there's some big eye tenors back there, and they've the like the lamp dock at MGM has lit this for him. You know, it's like whatever. Okay, fuck it. Like just put some 10Ks up there. If Louis coming down, he's gonna have a team meeting. Like what would they do? So they hung some green beds for us in the perms. You know, it's like that's what it would have been. And we put a couple of light, and that's how it's lit. I mean, it's just lit with those 5 lights. But it wasn't like something that we spent a lot of time discussing, really. It was like we just kind of
The stage
threw it up there.
The stage was chosen because the walls look great. By the way, funnily enough, the interior of these walls at MGM during this period, they would have been probably bright white muslin, right? They would have. Then now they're so aged and decrepit and sort of fall. So it gave us some amazing sort of tonality when you rake it. So we walked in on the tech scout and had to imagine 24-foot high by 80-foot wide bleachers that had yet to be built. And then we said, okay, we're going to drop these curtains down. And then the question was, well, we're going to see where the curtains are rigged from the perms. And I was like, we're going to let the matte painters take care of that. And then we discussed the flares, and we decided here that we were going to put the flares in. This is one of the discussions where we said we're going to add the flares later, so that because we're going to clone a lot of the audience and move them around.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah, there's a shit ton of matte work being done in this.
In like a shot like this.
Yeah, I think
it's like a third. It's a third of that, basically, right?
I think we had 80 extras, and we turned it into 200 or something like that.
But is that another one of those economic choices where, like, for the body of this scene, why am I going to pay for 300 extras when I know where I'm going to need them? I'll just buy.
Well, it's kind of, and again, it's never as mercenary as that. It's like you look at it and you think to yourself. I mean, I generally think in terms of the maximum amount of extras that I want to deal with is like 60 to 65, only because it's a very hard, once you get more than that, it's just hard to wrangle all those bodies and have the time to place them where you want. So we would place these very carefully, photograph the scene, and then I just knew we would turn this stuff over to Savage, and they would clone the people and populate the background, continue the curtains up, add the lens flares, and so all that stuff goes into making
those tenors are still pointed down the barrel. Like, what are the flares without that enhancement?
Well, the problem is that we loved that ring flare thing, which is such a simple lens characteristic of the 1940s.
Yeah.
But you can't get a modern lens to do that, as much as we tried.
You can't get a Summilux to do it.
Like this.
Yeah, and certainly not a Summilux. Yeah, I mean, so it's like you get, they just kind of halate a little bit. I mean, it wasn't even, you don't even get those like planetary flares, like a Primo, right? You don't get anything like that. I mean, the lenses are so good.
You get spokes. That's basically it.
Right. Yeah.
When you did the scene, did you talk at all about just having like a burning arc, or is it a little bit doing that now, or did you ever, like, I remember Sal Totino, when I was a camera assistant, used arcs. This was like right in the 90s. He actually brought out arcs on his sets, and like before they started becoming like you couldn't find them anymore.
We talked about taking some and like putting smoke machines in them, and in the end it was like, no, they litter with 20Ks, whatever,
yeah, for sure.
I mean, in sunlight at a 3000 ASA at T16 or whatever we were doing this at, it's a 20K, isn't it? Or it's a 10K. It's a big I-10 that's inside the housing of a.
It's a big I-10K. It's a big I-10K with a 12K globe. Yeah.
Okay, and all the way up, it was like it looked like that. It was just, it didn't even quite get to white, in terms of what you're seeing in the lens. So we had to go in and kind of add it and make it a little brighter, and that's why we added the flares, just to make it feel like, because in reality, I mean, it doesn't even come near what the sun.
It's like
we had more reflected light off the Fresnel than we did.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we were in Westlake in the middle of August or whatever that was. It was not. It was bright.
No, it was like November, wasn't it? It was before we went back to. Oh no, it was after we were on stage, so it was probably January.
Oh no, you're right. Oh, you're right. That was the end of the movie. This is the last thing we did.
This scene.
Well,
yeah,
the over the shoulder that you had, that's from Huntington Gardens, and that was in our first week of shooting. And then we scrapped the sequence and reshot it, and we did that out. And so everything you have beneath that was shot out in the Deep Valley.
And what were some of the reasons, if you don't mind, like,
no, I'll tell you.
They're redoing it, yeah.
When we shot this scene initially, the cat, this is a big deal scene. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of construction. There's a lot of coverage that needs to be, collected. And the days, as you know, move faster than you could ever when you're beholden to the sun, it'll never disappoint you in terms of making your life miserable.
I think it's the most stressful shooting days on Saturday day exterior.
Yeah. So
by far.
So we had done an inordinate amount of pre-planning we did some previs. This was all built in CAD, and we sort of dropped the shapes in because we needed to be able to frame exactly over Gary's shoulder to see dead center in the middle of that field, the funeral pyre. And so we had prevised all that stuff using Google Maps, and we'd figured out exactly where that. Then when we were no longer beholden to trying to shoot around the Huntington Gardens and all of their requirements, we went out to Westlake and we shot this. When we reconstituted the tents and the pyre and had a different and crafted a different introduction of Hearst. Originally, Hearst was part of the movie, and he had this kind of semi-ridiculous white mix, like cowboy garb, and he would fire his guns, and he would come riding over and say, "Hey, what's going on over here?" And then she would introduce him to Mankiewicz. Charles did not do himself any favors when he had a hairline crack in his back when we shot this the first time.
And he has to be on a horse.
Yeah. And so he had hurt himself pretty badly, and so it was a number of things. Number one was the actors didn't quite have who they were in their back pocket yet, because it was the first week of shooting. So everybody was a little tentative. The introduction of Hearst was problematic because Charles didn't have his voice. He was in pain, and you could tell from the way that he was. And there was something about it, even though it was amusing to see him as part of the action, and to see him in this Western outfit and kind of come riding over. It didn't feel as imperious and it didn't feel as much like what we wanted to say, which is, this is all just Hearst's. These are all Hearst's toys.
Yeah, exactly. His little backyard studio, right?
Exactly. His friends are his toys, and now he's just got a new, jester, and his girlfriend is a plaything, and we wanted it to make so we put this back together, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I threw my self on the altar of forgiveness with my wife and producer, and we reconstituted this, and in an environment that allowed us to be able to more effectively introduce Charles as this. The anecdote, anecdotally, it is a bit like the stunt man. It is a little bit like Peter O'Toole coming down on high on a Chapman crane, but it seemed like the 1928 version of it.
It's also lovely for the audience because you're reconstituting like a movie set, and it's one time in the movie where you're actually like sort of joining a set in the throes of like, and so you get to see all the toys. Like, I was like, as just a person who sort of, as filmmakers bring us back to a world and create a world, this was just fun to see the world, reconstituted of the time that they were making movies back then. And like, it seems like, again, I'm not stalking you with stories, but it seems like the stories always involve grips building massive amounts of track, like Mike Koo in Zodiac, and now Jerry having to build this track to put this camera car on.
And the camera car doesn't run; it's basically on a motion.
It's like on a winch, right?
It had to, because it didn't have an engine in it, and there was no chance that we were gonna put one in, just so that we could screw up the dialogue tracks.
And it had to go a certain speed in one direction, probably really slow in the other direction, because it's like there's a bit of a walk and talk as they
there's a whole walk and talk sequence. Yeah, there's that whole sequence in the latter part of the scene where Mank is walking along the side of the car. There, where the cameras are rigged to the car. Yeah. In fact, the reverse of that is, I think, my favorite shot in the movie. It just and it was like one of those happenstance things that just worked out the first couple rehearsals, where Mank looks back at Marion and all the stuff kind of just elegantly worked out. The timing of everything just kind of worked out.
And where she's like, "He likes you," and he's like, it's sort of like it's a really great button of the scene. It's like he wakes up with the worst hangover ever, and he sort of kills it. It is like little intro, he kills it. It's like best first impression ever.
Yeah.
It's a pretty wonderful scene. It made me think, though, when you said the early days, and every actor I've ever worked with, everyone's nervous. There's nerves. It's like you're also trying to understand what the movie is. And I'll put this on Eric first, which is, I've always thought, the movie, all best laid plans, you have plans of how you feel like it's going to look, what the thing, but you're actually discovering a little bit of the movie as you make it, certainly in the first couple weeks. And so often those first couple of weeks are like I've certainly done the exact same thing where we reshoot things from the first week because you're like, wait, we now know what this movie is. We know what these things
Well,
are.
Yeah.
there's the notion of this was a little, it was intended to be, I hate to use this term, but a little more Fellini-esque than our first pass. It's supposed to be, you know, the village idiot, like meandering through. I mean, to him, it's every day at work. Like you go down and somebody asks for you, and you go to the set, and people are doing ridiculous stuff, and they say, "Should I say this or that?" And you smokes a cigarette and thinks about it, and then he says, "Say that," and they say, "Okay, great, man, thank you," and he wanders off to do it. So it's Saturday morning, and somebody is screaming, and he wakes up with this horrendous hangover and wanders into this world. It had to have this, you know, it had to have a little Chauncey Gardner. It had to be a little bit of a man who is uninhibited by the fact that he's not been invited. He doesn't truly know what the stakes are or who's involved. And he just kind of wanders onto the set and is like, "Oh, I think I know Shelley. I'll go. I know you," you know, and he kind of does, he kind of accidentally navigates this strange world that we're going to come to know. Oh, all these people, that these are important people, and the way that he talks to them, you would would cause you some confusion. Initially, it was a little more arch. It was a little more pronounced. It was a little more delineated, and it didn't have the kind of. And then I find myself over here by the orange juice, and now I'm over by the samovar. Oh, coffee. You know, it didn't have that sort of like child careening through. And the second time we shot it, like both he and Amanda they knew exactly what they were.
Yes.
They knew the level of flirtation. They knew the level of, and they could summon it, with no effort at all. And I got to say, it certainly helped Charles Dance not having to like trot in on a horse. And also, we spent a good 3 or 4 days filling gopher holes so that we could send horses through this pasture.
The coverage is near identical if you look at the original cut of the scene in this one.
Yeah.
They're very similar. They're almost identical, yeah. At least up until the introduction of Hearst.
Yeah.
You've become a master of scenes that have a lot of dialogue. You don't use a camera movement. You use it very sparingly. It's very compositional and static, and yet somehow these dialogue scenes can be a bit thrilling to watch. And there's obviously editing, rhythm, and all that. But this cigar scene, I particularly in revisiting it and breaking it down, gave me so much joy. Was this written into the script in the sense of this, like they all grab cigars and then they sort of use them as ways in which they sort of go, you're next.
Yeah. Wait for your cue.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is based on some stories of the period as to how these guys would make it through their day. And remember, in Mankiewicz's, personally for Mankiewicz, there are stories about how he would leave the lot at Paramount for lunch at 12:15 or 12:30, go to the Frolic, walk to the Frolic room, or be driven to the Frolic room, have lunch there, drink till 3, be picked up by his wife, taken home to Tower Road in Beverly Hills, showered, put back into reasonable clothing, and returned to the studio so that he could walk off the lot at 6 p.m. and wave goodbye to the security guard. We wanted to talk about, and it's not contempt with a capital C. It's not that they had a kind of loving contempt for their captors, and I think that they really did think, I think that a lot of these guys were, Ben Hecht, everyone in this room is a stone cold genius. Ben Hecht more than most. And what we wanted to do and what Jack had written was this sort of round robin or this relay of I'm bullshitting up into a point, and then I'm going to run out of ideas. And when I point to you, it's your job to make me look like a hero. And the fact that it's finally left to Charlie Lederer, who's 22 or 23 at this point, to seal the deal was the gag. And
the one like bit of camera movement, it's that little tiny pan to include him in
it's like you sit there going, oh, I see, these are all the people who are involved in this. Oh yeah, the kibitzer.
That's right, and another guy. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, it's like there's no safe place to hide with Mankiewicz. I've never been afraid of dialogue. And that just may be my own, sense of wanting to step close to the fire, or I want to light my cigarette at a bonfire just by leaning in. But I feel like I felt like this was a fun scene that was about. David O. Selznick was not a stupid guy, so it's not like he's assuming that they're all doing their due diligence, and they're certainly working on stuff when we see them in the writer's room. Whether or not they're certainly not working on this outline,
right? Exactly,
because this is fantastically threadbare. But it was a way. Now, of course, we can get into the scholarly argument about, well, but Paramount never made horror movies, and that's not really the point of the thing. The point is that, when push came to shove, they were supposed to deliver a certain amount of work every day, and they would meet and they would talk and they would bullshit, and then they would kind of come at a certain point in the day, they would come and shop their wares. And so that's what we wanted to talk about. And it is this was a rogues gallery of really acclaimed problem solvers, narrative problem solvers.
Yeah. And then from a practical standpoint, like from a filmmaking standpoint, do you often shoot with two cameras? Is it often single camera?
Constantly two cameras.
Constantly. So you'll find a way not to compromise. But some shots are very specific as far as marching in on a lens in which you wouldn't necessarily, like from this wide shot into those close-ups of these guys, you're now in a lens that probably prevents a second camera, or to some extent, or I guess if you were.
I think this was probably, we probably shot a low raking shot on that one at the same time. We would have pulled the two foreground guys to shoot the.
Yeah, just for like that specific moment.
I think
or we may have had we
40.
probably, he walks over to the chair, and we probably had another camera waiting for a close up of him, which we didn't use, I think, in the cut. But he walks over and leans against the chair there.
Yeah.
But interesting. So you think maybe you started in this angle here? This is the widest in the reverse.
Well, we'd probably be to the right. We would be the right of this.
And is it because I'm like thinking for you, Eric, oh man, it's the one shot I don't have the damn windows in the shot. We're gonna start there, like it's the one, But is it because you want to start?
The second camera would be to the right of this by about 4 feet and looking back in.
Yeah, I would have seen those windows. No, I mean the room there. I didn't really relight anything here.
The room, you lit it from outside.
The room is lit. I mean, but we talk about all the pieces of coverage before we light anything.
Of course.
So it's, I have a really good idea of what the cutting pattern might be, or where we're gonna, where I can cheat, where I shouldn't. I mean, I guess in this case we lit the widest shot first, and then we just went for it, basically.
It was one day, and it was one long day, and it really took a while to get the master to sing.
Yeah, it's probably 30 shots.
Yeah, probably 15 two cameras or 14 two cameras.
Sure, yeah. But that's an incredible day, actually. That seems almost.
Well, but one of the things, again, that when you're not moving, you can, and when you're reset time, that's one of the places that I really am dictatorial about is like, there's no time for cell phone calls. There's no time for, cruising the fucking internet while, in between. We don't allow that. We just go, you shoot and you go right into the next one. You shoot, you go right into the next one, you shoot. And that it's essential in order to get the timing of this thing that everybody be focused and be concentrating. And I think that the actors were probably, this was a house in Pasadena, and we would take, they would basically exit to a pop-up tent that had 6 chairs or 7 chairs in it, and they would be there. And I don't think our reset time for any of the was probably more than 5 minutes.
This time it takes to basically replace the camera. Yeah.
Pretty much. And then, maybe if we had like, here that there's a little bit of a bounce that's coming up that you can see that's hitting into Selznick's cheek, and some of it's coming from a low bounce. You can see there's an edge on von Sternberg. You can see he's got a little something on the back of his hip, and that's definitely not coming from the window. So that's probably a little unit in there that had to be jockeyed around. But other than that, it was pretty much ready to go.
Let's talk about this as just one last scene, because it's a beautiful scene. But, she comes out to, everyone's sort of coming, postscript coming out to visit, to basically say, you can't do this. And he gets like multiple visitors until finally this relationship that's been one of the most lovely parts of his life, this platonic relationship with Marion Davies, she comes with this smile. She comes with a smile, and then they go and sit and have this conversation. So just tell me a little bit about this scene, because in the rewatching of this scene and the final lines, if we do make it, don't be disappointed. If you don't make it, please don't be disappointed. It's just incredibly lovely and had a real emotional impact on me in the second viewing.
The location where we intended to shoot this, which we had every intention of shooting, we were told there were adjacent to this location was a set of train tracks.
Now, where was this? This was actually in Victorville.
This was in
This was across the street from
in Victorville.
Yeah.
In the middle of nowhere. And we're like, okay, this is cool. This will work. And there were some train tracks. And we said, well, how often do the trains run? Twice a day. Twice a day. Very predictable, twice a day. Once every 8 hours or something. Well, they were right about the twice, but what they were wrong about was it was like twice every 8 minutes.
Yeah. See, we picked this location. There's this beautiful little bog or frog pond that's right across right next to the train tracks, next to the house and the guest house in Victorville. We found this place and we thought the trees are beautiful. There's this heather that is, the blows across will augment that with, goose down or whatever, and we'll shoot it all here. This will be fine. And we had a train track issue. We also had, this was a cattle ranch, so there's an inordinate amount of cow shit all over the place that had to be cleaned up. Ironically, this picture that you chose, the first one with the chauffeur walking back, is a composite, because the people are shot blue screen and then composited into a black and white frame, because we had so little time to shoot. When we finally got out to shoot this location, we realized that they weren't going to be able to get they weren't going to be able to do a take without having to stop for about 2-3 minutes for a train to pass. So I punted. I just said, this is too infuriating. I'm not going to do this. Let's shoot plates. And we sent the cast away. We took the log that we knew that we were going to use. We were going to bring that back to the stage. We supported it so that it would be in exactly the place that we wanted it to. Then we put the actors on it, and we figured out all the framing. We shot all the backgrounds in black and white with the monochrome of the setting, and we retouched them. We took them all into the DI and got as much sort of range out of them as we could. And then we not projected them, but we played them back on an 18 foot by 30 foot LED screen. This one that you're pointing to now, or that you have the sun was actually behind the trees, but we added a flare over the top of it to help mix the two things in. But it was kind of uncanny how much actual brightness you got out of the LED screen. So this is them in front of an LED screen. The first shot in the sequence, we just fed the LED screen blue, chroma blue, and we shot them sitting on the same log, and then we split them into the plate that we'd shot of the
It's the only color shot in the movie.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, chroma blue, you can't do that in mono.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, what we
It's
did
the only
was,
color shot. Yeah.
what we did was we had this plate, and we figured out within reason what the approximate focal length was. We knew the distance that we would be away. We knew what the height of the lens was, and we put them on the log, and then we just got the camera where it needed to be, and then we put a telephoto lens on, turned the screen to blue, swapped the camera body out for DSMC2, shot it in color, turned it over to the editorial department, and because we had the dupe ratio, we could blue screen composite them onto the log that was in evidence, and we could line everything up. And
wow.
So we ended up, again, it's horses for courses. We did what we had to do. But this scene it is strangely ended up being this this melange of compositing.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, for an audience member, I was just fully, captivated by the emotional content of the scene, to then know later that it's a very technical scene. It's a scene that needed some technology to kind of help execute it.
You needed an inordinate amount of technology in order to make it look really simple. Two people sit on a log and chat.
That to me is filmmaking. It's filmmaking back then, which is like, tell me a scene that seems super simple and yet it's not. And that would be, I guess,
Lawrence takes Aqaba.
Yeah,
Page to page.
That's right. Yeah, there you go.
3 weeks of shooting.
Well, it's a lovely scene. I had no idea it was shot against LED screens, and
yeah, and I got to say, I think this LED thing is
here to stay.
It's here to stay for all of the right reasons.
I agree. I think we've only begun to see the ways in which it's going to be a transformative part of our filmmaking process.
It's not even a color; it's an entire palette. You have so many. There's so many opportunities with this. And I'm not even talking about. I'm not talking about some sort of camera tracking system that allows you to put in in-game engine.
Sure, exactly. The frustrum and moving.
No, I'm just talking about just being able to shoot plates and bring them back to the set and have them look through the camera exactly the way that you want them and go, okay, that's done.
Yeah, because you also did your driving work that way as well, right? Some of it.
Yeah, all of it.
All the subtle reflections and all the interactivity you get is just, it's impossible to get any other way.
Yeah,
really.
It's amazing you did it on just an 18-foot screen or so. Like, it's not a very big profile to get all this stuff. Yeah.
Well, that one you have there, we prevised it. We got the 3D model. The art department had a 3D model of the car, and I threw it in Cinema 4D, and we were like, because we were conscious of the budget, so we're like trying to find the bare minimum, like what is the absolute minimum we know we can cover, and that particular shot, I mean, it's the edge of the screen is like centimeters outside of those windows. We're using the entire thing.
I also think that technology, just being able to previs, is also a real time saver if you use it correctly, because the way that it can actually give you information in advance of shooting, I think is something that even smaller movies can utilize if they can afford the previs. Yeah.
The thing about previs is, to my way of thinking, you don't really need previs unless what you need is to know exactly within 3/4 of an inch how big the screen needs to be for whatever focal length for being where you want. When you use it for this, it's previs is really valuable.
Yeah.
And when and for the most part we can kind of ballpark things in, but something like this, you really need to know what the dupe ratio is.
No, I think people think of it as like, oh, to design some corkscrew shot that a camera can actually do. But I actually use it sometimes to go, we need to move this wall because we want to put the camera here. And in advance of that, you can actually know we need more distance. Or this camera angle or these kind of things. So I think in those ways it's invaluable. Yeah. So why give me a little insight into why Eric is a good fit for you. And what do you look for? And I want to know a little bit from you, Eric, in terms of just because I'm always interested in just, one of the things you rarely hear is sometimes like the expectations of you have your own expectations as a DP, but the expectations illuminated from a director as to like what makes a DP work kind of better. I mean, of course, everyone wants speed and they want skill, of course, but what are some of the other things that makes it a nice partnership, and certainly did for this film?
Well, I think speed is a misnomer. I think the notion that, people running around amped up on espresso, chewing their inside of their cheeks till they're bloody is not helpful. The moment that the master is blocked in, and before everything gets cut and schmutzed in the way that it's supposed to, I'm already thinking about the next 3 or 4 setups, and Eric has that ability to be able to managing the workforce that's getting the master in shape, but also be able to think 2 and 3 moves on the chessboard ahead. And that's essential. I think any working DP in our business has to be able to think 3-dimensionally and not just like, oh, I can't deal with that right now. I just need to focus on this. You would severely diminish your ability to work effectively. But I also think that it's about listen, Eric has amazing taste, and you can't teach that. And he also has I think, because he coming from, and I've had this experience in working with DPs who were gaffers, or DPs who were camera operators or focus pullers, and there's a very different personality type. And I think that when you've had to negotiate personalities and manage manpower, it puts you in rarefied air, because a lot of coming from the camera department classically, in my experience coming up through ILM and being in 659 at that time, is that there's this kind of fraternity of the wrists and the gear guys, and their Pelican cases and their weather gear and all that stuff. And gaffers come from a place where they're the fulcrum between most of the manual labor that's going on a set, and how the collection device, the artifice of the collection device, is going to see that. So from my standpoint, the thing that makes, you want somebody who has sensitivity to light. You want somebody who can paint. You also want somebody who's, is multidimensional in the way that they can think about it. I remember working with Hersavides, who is somebody that I adored, as difficult as it could be at times. I adored working with him because you could have a conversation about Marion and Mark, and have a conversation about Rembrandt, and have a conversation about Gordon Willis, and have a conversation about Banksy, and he could as a person taking in visual stimulus, effectively talk about what it is that's powerful about all these disparate influences. One of them, if you're talking about Gordon Willis, you're talking about cinema, so you're talking about a director. What Rembrandt has to do with, or Mary Ellen Mark has to do with cinema, is an interpretive thing, right? And it's going to be, he's going to be talking about what it means to him. He's going to be talking about how to achieve it. He's going to be talking about focal lengths. He's going to, and that's an amazing gift that you can. And Eric, I can do that with Eric. I can have those conversations. I can do that with Jeff. I can do that with a lot of the cinematographers that I have been lucky enough to work with. But then for them to transmit that to a working, small but working army that has to now turn that into, is that half grid, is that HMI, and further back, and are we going to bounce it? And it's the safeguarding of that personal, intimate conversation about what do we want to get, what do we want to feel, and should it make us feel like Bresson, or and there are very specific differences there, and how do we achieve that with the amount of labor that we have here, and what is the expectation? Because as Eric will tell you, my expectation is if rehearsal is done at 7, I want to be shooting by 7:15. And sometimes it's unrealistic, but a lot of times we're preparing for it.
Okay, so Eric, take that then. I want you to answer that specifically, because does that come from obviously pre-lighting and things like that, but just giving a starting place for you to see the light during rehearsal, so at least you are some percentage there. But also, on a more global question, I want you just to talk a little bit about David and how that fit works for you. And is it because he has technical knowledge? Is it what makes him sort of a director that's, because you obviously, as DPs, we work with some directors that know very little about camera. They're writers, or they certainly know the emotion they want to get, and then it's our job to interpret a lot more. But yeah, speak to the 7:15 thing, because that, I think, I also want to be ready by 7:15, even as a DP. I want to keep the thing moving. So I understand that impulse from a director standpoint. So how do you sort of help accomplish that?
Well, I mean, I do my best. I mean, my favorite thing in the day is the rehearsal. I love it. I love that whole process of watching it come together and watching it develop, and watching David work with the cast, and our little subtle glances during the rehearsal of like, from here, right? And then this can push in when she goes there. And there's a lot of nonverbal communication happening while the pieces are being constructed, and I adore that process. And I love to be there and think about it, because there's like that puzzle that you're putting together in your head, right? Okay, so she's going to be there, we're going to be low, he's standing, so like I got to put a light there, whatever. One of the amazing things of working with David is that he does generally what he says he's going to do. So I don't have to expend, like the movie I'm on now, I have to expend tremendous amount of energy and resources, because we can't shoot at the time of day we want to shoot. Right. So we have construction cranes and fly swatters and all this gack that I don't really need. I just need it because we really should be shooting at 5, but instead we're shooting at 9 a.m. And David is a filmmaker that understands that, and understands how that impacts his reality. And that's that's the misnomer. It's like, well, that stuff that is around isn't desirable at all. If anything, it gets in the way, And, in most cases, I don't know about you, Larry, but like in most cases, in my experience, like if you're a DP and you get it 90% of the way there, you've won. Like everyone congratulates you. You're totally there. And in the back of your head, I could get, if I just had a little bit more time, or we just did one more take, I could fix this thing and I could get the other 8%. We wouldn't get 100, but we get 98%. And to me, like, that's the magic. It's not the 90%. It's like where you go from kind of acceptable to good is like in that last 8% of application of whatever it is you're doing, and so to have the privilege to work with someone who recognizes the value and like, let's try and get that extra 8.5% that we know we can do if we just push ourselves a little bit harder, is like a complete privilege. It's an honor. So and it's not something that happens very often. Normally you're like completely rewarded for kind of just barely getting it done in time, and like that's so devastating when you're like, you can just like, I just need a second, or if I just knew that the actor was going to go there, I would have put a light there and then they wouldn't be in the dark, or they'd be in focus. If we just did one more and we know that she's going to lean in there and, then we'll get it in focus. It'll be fantastic. So, it's like those things like,
and I don't need to be encouraged to do.
right. Yeah. But like you say, though, in the entirety of why you're there is to photograph these actors in this place. So like, why compromise then? Like that's the one place not to compromise, right?
Yeah, that's stupid.
let's
Yeah.
let's try it. Let's try it. Yeah, I mean, no, and I think it's like, and the other, like, look, it is a great, it is a great thing to be able to have a broad, uh, abstract conversation with a director about what they're trying to accomplish, uh, emotionally, um, or whatever, or aesthetically. But then it's equally important, I think, and incredibly valuable to be able to have a relationship with someone where you can be like, okay, uh, if we don't put it, if we have that much headroom, I can't put a light there, and then I can't separate them against the background, and I don't know how to solve this problem. And then to be able to bring the director into your world and to help you solve that problem is incredible as a cinematographer, because that's what it
And
is. You know,
very,
we're all like trying.
that's very unique. Yeah, and that's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's really important, you know. And I think like and it's something I've tried to bring into my, you know, a lot of us, I think, try and protect the directors we work with and not involve them in our struggles, because you want to feel like you can solve every problem. But you know, like what I've been trying to do recently after working with David quite a bit is like, no, like, look, if you block it this way, these are the compromises we have to make, or these are the changes we have to make, and this is, and not to suggest that we can't block it this way, but this is how it's impacting what we're trying to do, you know.
Yeah.
And to be able
Whenever
to
you
have
have
that have a nuts and bolts conversation with
Yeah.
someone, because that's really what it is in the end. Is like we're trying to put all this on camera, so that we, you know, and in many
And we're in
cases, in
this
my experience,
together. And we're in this together. That's what
yeah,
we're literally we're in this
absolutely. So
together,
you know,
right?
and I've learned so much just by recognizing that, like, it is, in most cases, it's not about the photography, you know. And so to step back and say, okay, no, I, of course she has to go there, you know.
it's not that it's not about the photography. It is about the photography. It's about the photography of behavior. And
Right.
either those two things are working in concert to make a greater understanding of the moment, or they're not. But it can never just be about the photography. It has to be that the photography is the glove, and the behavior is the hand, right? The thing that's under all of it is, did you collect the moments that you need to juxtapose against one another to take somebody from here to here? Like, and that is, you know, when the last thing in the world that a director needs is to have a director of photography who's saying, I'm just here to make it look cool, right? I'm just here to make it look, you know, because sometimes the most powerful way to confront somebody with behavior is to not have it be the most memorable shot. Sometimes the most memorable shots are not the most beautifully lit. And so what you don't want to do is seed a tremendous amount of you know, money, time, manpower to somebody who's just going, I just want it to be cool. You know, you want to be in a conspiracy with someone who's helping you tell your story, and tell your story through the people who are playing dress up, and tell your story in conjunction with the army of people who make all of those people look period appropriate, handsome, attractive, whatever. There's all that stuff that's going on. You need, you know, a confidant at in the center of the morass of humanity that is going to be there to go, did we get, you know, we, and that, you know, we talk about the little glimpses that we steal at each other during, you know, rehearsal. It's not always, oh, it's not always about the camera. It oftentimes is about the moment. It's like, do you want that? I want that. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I have to carve out a
Right.
space, right? Because if he's going to go over wide, that may mean we're going to, if you want to be over that other shoulder, we're going to have to take a chainsaw to the set. You know, all of those things have repercussions. So that's it. It's like, it's having somebody who's in it with you, who has stellar taste, knows how to run their operation, and can help you map out a way. I mean, when we got to reshooting the scene of Amanda on the funeral pyre and meeting Hearst for the first time, by the time we shot it the second time, we knew that we could drive a little stake into the ground and go, we got to be on this side of the pyre from 8:15 in the morning to 11:15. We can then no longer past 11:15 be anywhere near here. Now we've got to be in front of it, or we've got to be looking up at the sky. So then we did that. And then we say, okay, now when he crosses over and talks to Hearst, that has to be from 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 3. And you know, it can make you look foolish to the cast and the crew when you say, okay, we can now no longer shoot in this direction. But when you embrace it, you make your life so much easier, because now you're not trying to tent the whole side of the fucking field, you know, or get a bounce that's going to give you what you had coming off the dirt early on, which you no longer have. So it's that it's the give and take of knowing all of the weird douchebaggery that you have to go through in order to fake it the right way.
All right, guys, I literally couldn't enjoy this more, and I really appreciate the time. Like I said, I think people should watch it again, because you're going to see things you didn't see the first time, and you can, you know, really understand why this movie is so spectacular. So thank you. Have a good Saturday. I appreciate you coming out. And like I said, we'll see you around next time.
Nice to see you, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Adios.
Get it.